And that just amazed me.
Yeah, every phone call I get from a homeowner who's just interested in his own personal health, they always wind up doing their own testing. They never call back. They just pick my brain.
Oh, is that right? And then what, do they go to
Then they
Kmart
go
or
to,
wherever they
right,
can pick these up
right.
off the
And,
shelf
you
in
know,
retail?
I'm sure I'd probably do the same thing, but that's my experience on
Yeah.
it.
If you test the home and the concentration comes down below the action limit of 4, and again, let's assume this is not a real estate transaction, should that homeowner test again, and how long would you recommend they wait before testing a second time?
Well, we usually tell them that they can test once a year, and that'll just give them a comfort level that it's fine and
Right.
that it's remaining that way.
Right.
I like to have them tested in the wintertime when they're definitely closed house conditions.
Right. That's the best time to
Right.
test, certainly, yeah, to get your most
And-
reasonable result.
And if they change the construction of the house, if they put an addition on it, if they do that before the year or two is up, it's a good time to
Yes.
retest.
To do it then, sure.
Sure.
Also, people who are on wells, and I was talking to some laboratory technicians recently, and people who are on wells get their well water tested periodically. Certainly you get it tested prior to the house purchase in general. And then afterwards I asked them, how often should you test the well water for things like coliform and other kinds of contaminants in the water? And the recommendation by the lab, well, they ought to test roughly yearly to get some emotional comfort out of knowing what the results are. And so I think we can use that as a rule of thumb or a guideline and say, well, you know, if you're going to test your well water on a yearly basis or maybe every 2 years, you should perhaps check for your radon concentrations with the same kind of frequency. Interestingly enough, the northeast part of this continent is in an earthquake-prone area, and we do have earthquakes here. Many of them we don't notice. One I remember in 1988 rattled the windows in my house, which was what brought it to my attention that, by golly, we do live in an earthquake-prone area. Not exactly like the California region, but nevertheless, those kinds of things can change the radon concentrations that are pouring into the house during that time. Do you have any other comments that we should make to the public, homeowners or other testers?
I have a wish, I guess you'd call it, I think the labs have a 20% error factor they're allowed in testing.
Laboratories are required to get all the results within plus or minus 25%.
25?
Right.
Okay, well, a lot of times that 25% is enough to blow a real estate deal, and it's really not a true test. And some people are so uptight on radon, just as much as people have no concern over it, the ones that know about it, they're really concerned. If they got a reading of 5, they just want to run away from this house, and that makes realtors unhappy and everybody unhappy.
Right.
So if the labs didn't have that 25% error factor, if they were more down to like 5%, I would think there would be less blown radon deals due to radon testing.
Let me say a couple of comments about that, Tony, before I mislead anybody. When I say the 25%, part of the R&P program says that a lab, for example, that analyzes charcoal canisters has to send 5 of their canisters down to, say, Montgomery, Alabama, to the radon chamber there, and those get sent back. And the laboratory now has to identify the result of the radon concentration in each can within plus or minus 25%. Now, a lot of labs do much better than that.
Right.
And so what you could do is ask your cooperating lab, what is the percentage error? They should be able to give you a percentage error that's involved with the measurement. And that number should be less than 25%.
I think that's on their printout with the efficiency. Doesn't that come under the efficiency rating on
Well, that depends on the lab, what they want to print out.
Mine is.
There's been some mixed emotions about that. For example, do you want to report to the homeowner that the concentration is 7 plus or minus 2? That doesn't put, even on the minus side, that doesn't put them down below the action limit. Still, now the homeowner's going to call and say, what's this plus or minus 2 mean?
Right.
Okay, and it adds to the workload. And so there's some
Right.
question as to whether or not laboratories want to report it to the homeowner. Not that they're trying to hide it, but just, well, now we're going to get more phone calls. I can attest to this myself when we were home testing here with the university. And we got a lot of phone calls. And unfortunately, at that time, I put my name and my number, my office number. And the phone just kept ringing constantly with people who had questions, even though they had gotten their results. So in any case, the upshot to this 1 minute of monologue is that you can ask your lab to tell them what their percentage error is on that particular measurement. And they can give you a statistical value. which is significant, which is a usable number. And that will be generally much less than 25%. You should expect to see maybe 5 or 6 or 7% typically in measurements. Even down, maybe down around 4 picocuries per liter at the action limit, maybe you'd give them 10 to 12%, something like that.
That test that I ran on the 2 different labs on side by side, the one lab was a large canister and the other one was small, this size. And the large canisters were higher 9 times out of 10. There was one reading on the
That's
small
right.
canister that was higher.
That's right. It would,
And now
that's
that told me that something wasn't quite right there. Somewhere there had to be an air problem.
Well, that's, yeah, we never really resolved that completely, but
But they were
something-
all in the 25%. That's why
Oh, yeah.
it was
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
legal limits.
That's right, that's right. Richard, if you had some final comments you'd like to leave for the viewers, what would you like to say?
Well, just that a lot of people are not testing because they think that, number one, a radon problem can't be fixed, that it's going to devalue their house, that they'll never be able to fix it and never be able to sell their house. And that, of course, is not true. I mean, every house that's ever had a radon problem has been able to be fixed. So there's no reason not to test for that reason. And secondly, some people think that radon remediation is going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars. That's usually not the case. The average remediation is about $1,000. And if somebody shops around, they can probably do better than that. So
Right.
it's not a catastrophe.
Right. In fact, the average value for mitigation in '88, I believe, was $1,500, and in 1990 or '89, I've forgotten the exact year, but that had dropped to about $1,250. So I think that's going to level out, and I think somewhere around $1,000 is a pretty reasonable number for an average mitigation. Not to say that you have a 6,000 square foot house and you need more than that, but for the average house with the average mitigation problem, about $1,000 to cure it. So it's not very expensive to resolve the issue in light of the value of the property to begin with, and in further light of the health hazard that is so darn significant because of this problem. Dory, how about you? If you had some words for the
I do.
viewers. Okay.
There is so much around us that's uncontrollable. This is one item that we can control by testing our homes, finding out if we are living in an elevated area, and mitigate the house and take control over something that you can.
I'd like to thank Richard Ross, Dory Natali, and Tony Capolini for contributing their time and coming to East Stroudsburg University to help produce this issue of the continuing education program on radon. If you'll now turn to your text and begin answering the questions on your quiz so that you could mail those into us, you will have completed another issue of continuing education. Thank you very much.